Now I'll call this meeting to order with the microphone on. This is day 2 of our meetings for the Montana Board of Public Education. Today is, what is the date? Today's the November 21st. What day of the week is it? Thursday, November 21st. We've been all over town, all over campus, all over a bunch of different schools. So we have had a great morning of tours and visits. And I don't know what day it is, but no, it's been a great day so far. We are currently meeting at the Wilson School, which is the administrative building for the Bozeman Public Schools located at 404 West Main. And we're going to reconvene the Board of Public Ed. And before we proceed with our agenda, let us begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Chris, will you please call the roll?
Tim Tharp,
Here.
Susie Hedlund,
Excused?
Lisa Schmidt,
Here.
Ron Slinger,
Here.
Madeline Quinlan,
Here.
Jane Hammond, Renee Rasmussen. I think our sound,
Yeah, please come in.
Renee is online. There she is.
Gavin Mao, Superintendent Arnson, Commissioner Christian's office, Governor Jean Forte's office.
I'm back.
All right. Thank you, Renee.
I don't think.
Montana Board of Public Education encourages the public to participate in board discussions. Persons who wish to participate should sign the public comment sign-in sheet and identify themselves to the board chair or executive director prior to the board's consideration of the matter in which the persons are concerned. Anyone wishing to participate in board discussions will be is a professional development unit provider. Attending a BPE meeting may qualify you to receive professional development units. At this time, I'd like to open up for anyone who would like to introduce themselves and welcome all visitors today. Nobody wants to introduce?
Yeah.
No problem. We'll just continue. And at this point, before we proceed with item number 7, I'll turn things over to our assessment committee chair, Dr. Slinger.
Thank you, Chair Tharp. Appreciate that very much. So as any good chair, I'm immediately going to turn over the duties to Executive Director Flynn as we have a panel discussion and very excited to hear what they have to say. I'd like asked her to do a background of what we're talking about today and an introduction. So Executive Director Flynn, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'd invite Nell and Craig to come up and sit here while I maybe give some opening comments. You'll also see that we have Genevieve online here today, who's going to be answering some of the questions as well. For background, just want to remind you all, we're really talking about early literacy tools today, specifically around those lists of approved screening tools. At your last meeting, we really talked about the documents that are in our packet, and I'm sure you were wondering why we didn't have our lovely experts last time, but they were unavailable. So I thought it made sense just to give you a preview at our last meeting, make sure you were able to ask questions. And then today, bring our experts in for you to ask them questions that they will undoubtedly be able to answer. I do want to point in your packet, we do have a memo that just gives some background of early literacy targeted interventions, the process for the list of approved screening tools, as well as a proposed timeline. In your packet that's online, we're on page 256, and which is the proposed application, and page 258 is the proposed criteria. I'll turn it over to Nell and Craig now to give some introductions of themselves, and Genevieve as well to give some introductions. And then I'm just going to say a quick few things before we jump into Q&A, but really want them to give an opportunity to talk a little bit about sort of their day jobs and what the work that they do in assessment, and really share a little bit about their expertise in this area. So I'll turn it over to you guys. Make sure you hit that green button.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's wonderful to be here and meet you face to face. I'm Dr. Danielle Thompson, and my day job is spending time in Montana public schools and schools across the nation, working for literacy, more positive literacy outcomes, and that is inclusive of rebuilding assessment systems that help us find the risk early so we can do something about it and change lives as fast as possible.
My name is Craig Busher. I earned my doctorate at the University of Montana. Now I'm an educational consultant focusing on literacy and reading instruction. I do teach as an adjunct at the University of Montana as well. But I spend most of my time doing trainings for teachers in literacy instruction, or doing coaching and consulting here in Montana and across the country.
Genevieve, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Good to be here remotely. My name is Genevieve Thomas, and I am the Director of Professional Learning for School Services of Montana. We're a small educational nonprofit serving most of the districts in the state in one capacity or another. My training and background is in special education and school psychology. I'm a school psychologist by training, and I'm also a doctoral student in the Reading Science program at Mount St. Joseph University.
Thanks, Genevieve. So before we jump into the Q&A, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the timeline that is on your memo. I don't want to get bogged down with our experts here today on the timeline, just because there's so many other things that we could talk about, but I did want to make sure that I addressed this a little bit. The language in the rules that the Board of Public Ed created around early literacy targeted intervention said that the Board of Public Ed would review the list of approved screening tools in odd years. Well, with 2025 literally around the corner, it made sense that we think through the timeline a little bit and what that might look like if we had a vendor come to the Board of Public Ed and say, hey, I'm ready to apply this year. So we really wanted to have something in writing that you all could consider as part of this conversation. Given that there's action today on your agenda and hopefully everything is approved, we can get that posted as soon as possible on our website, which would then allow the application window to really be between December 1st and January 1st. Then, depending on what types of applications we get, we would then have an opportunity to address those with our experts here today, to really think through the application, the criteria, and then make a presentation to all of you at your meeting in January and then final action in March. If you remember, the language in statute said that assessments should take place in April, May, and June of each year. So ensuring that we're giving time for our school districts to potentially use one of these assessments if they were to make it on that list of approved screening tools. So I wanted to address that first, and then, certainly see if folks had any questions about the timeline before we jumped into the Q&A with our experts here. All right, straightforward. Love it. Mr. Chair, back to you for Q&A.
Thank you, Executive Director Flynn. So, why don't we just start off? I'm sure that Director Flynn's given you the questions, just that she's given us the questions. So, why don't we just talk about how this whole process began and what's the beginning of this whole that we're about ready to enter into here? I mean, I know one of the action items we have is to approve a list of tools, but walk us through the process that you developed looking into this evaluation tool.
I can kick that one off. So,
Opposite.
Hit it again. There you go.
all right, there we
Got it,
go.
green.
Oh, we have to hit it again. Okay, so after HB 352 came into being, we started to meet as a panel to discuss the rule. And Genevieve and Craig and I were not all on that panel, but it came out of that panel that there would probably need to be some freedom in the fences around what assessments were probably chosen, because there's a lot out there. And some of their manuals are 1,200 pages long. And so the freedom in the fences kind of thought is that, if as long as we're within the fences, these are pretty good tools. So let's figure out what those fences are. And then McCall and I went forth to figure out if there was a team of experts within Montana, which I believe there obviously are. And it was such a privilege to work with Genevieve and with Craig. And then we went forth to figure out what that best path was. And the first thing we did was we looked at a document from 2018 from a gentleman named Yakov Pecher out of the University of Florida. He's a statistician and probably one of forerunners in helping us all understand assessment better. And he created a document that said, you know, if you want to assess literacy early and what that looks like in a school, look at these things. And we're like, well, let's just start looking at what he looked at, right? No, we don't need to recreate this. Then a lot of states have gone before us in all of these rules. So why not look at what other states have done? And if there's any guidance we can gain from that. And so, Craig, you want to add anything else, or Genevieve?
I think that sounds good now.
So board members, you'll see it, as we mentioned in your packet on starting 256 with a list of approved screening tools. As far as the applications, you'll see the different breakdown on these things. How did you determine which questions actually were going to be needed to be answered in order to determine quality?
So I can share a little bit about that maybe, and then Craig and Nell, you can jump in. So we did start with the language that was already in the legislation. And then we were also thinking about, it's kind of a tricky like balancing act with the screeners. The screeners are really about predicting risk, right? And so we want to ensure that Montana districts are using screeners that reliably predict risk. And there's always this tricky balance between true positives, false positives, and true negatives and false negatives. And typically, you know, when you have one go up, like a screener is better at reducing the number of false positives, so it's not over identifying kids, then you kind of have the problem in the other direction. And we both don't want to miss kids who truly are at risk, but we don't also want to over identify kids who aren't truly at risk and overload our resource systems. So we were, as Nell said, kind of looking to the field and looking at what other states were doing to figure out the best way to kind of dance that balance between those two things.
And so another thing to consider when you look at the bigger picture of assessments, so these standardized formal assessments that are normed, is so that the first thing that you want to consider, is this a valid tool? And so when researchers create these different assessment tools, that's usually the first thing that we're looking at. Does this really assess well what it's intended to assess? And then if the answer to that is no, then you can take that assessment and you can put it aside. If the answer is yes, you know, then you have these other things that we start to look at. So is it also reliable? So do you get consistent results? If all of us in this room assess the same child in the same moment, would we all get the same results? So you would want, you know, that to be true. And then since this is a screening tool, as Genevieve said, then from there you want to go and look at how well does it categorize students. You're categorizing students in one of two categories. You're at risk or you're not at risk. And then, you know, as Genevieve was saying, none of these tools can do that with 100% accuracy. So you're always going to have students who flag that are actually fine, and you're going to have students who do not flag on that screener who are not fine. And so you want to have a tool that also does a really good job of accurately identifying. And it's not 100%. It'll never be 100% perfect.
Another really innovative thing about Montana's documents is that we're challenging the field to look at oral language, because oral language predicts all early literacy skills. So if you could find early language difficulties at 3.5 years of age, and it predicts your alphabet learning and your phonological development and therefore your word reading, why wouldn't we begin looking there? So when the panel met, we not creation of these set of items, but the panel prior, we were like, what are all those things that we could find at risk? What are the domains that we would screen, and which ones predict what? And then, well, if we have this really lengthy list, which we all see right here, there's a lot of items right here. Well, which tools actually screen the risk in that domain the best? Not all of them screen every single one of these the best. So we went to Montana schools and leaders to be able to differentiate and say, oh, you know, if I'm picking one for a 4-year-old, I might pick oral language and I might choose this tool. But if I'm picking a screener for a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old, that's going to be this one. And it might be a really judicious decision for them. This one might be way cheaper for this age bracket. And then it maybe is way cheaper for in this age bracket to choose a different screener. Or one screener might have all of them. So we wanted to be able to allow for the Montana leaders in schools to really have some flexibility, freedom in the fences, right? And know that you can find risk in each of these domains, but it will be at a different checkpoint in that development of reading skill.
So as I look over the list of tools, and it's pretty broad. I mean, there's a lot of tools listed on there and so forth. The thought process behind that is to give the flexibility to the school district or the practitioners as ones that they feel would work best for their district and what they feel is most valid for what they're doing. Because I look at some of these and there's multiple oral language, there's multiple, and so explain to me in layman's terms, because I do not understand what I'm even saying. What would your expectation be if I'm just a school district and I'm trying to figure out how are we going to assess as these kids are coming to us to enter into school? Like, what advice would you give them? Because we're giving them a laundry list of tools that we'll accept, that we feel are acceptable. What's your thought as far as helping them, the criterion of as far as narrowing them down for them?
I'll kick this one off and Genevieve and Craig can jump in. Craig and I were just having bite to eat before we came. And, ultimately when we work in school districts, and I know Genevieve does this too, is we really want to provide educators and leaders with tools that say, if this, then this, if this, then this, and their flow charts. And so when you move into a meeting and you have to make really quick decisions, you're like, oh, we screened here. It said this, we do this. And we both were like, we should have created a flow chart with these items,
Yeah.
So that to your point, we do want this to be a really efficient and effective process because there is a lot out there.
Yeah.
And it's hard to weed through. I just had a colleague who's doing something for another state note that he read a 1,200-page document from one assessment company submitting for basically what we're going to get. So it's like, oh my goodness, this is big. It's really meaningful. We don't want to give our school districts tools that won't get the job done. We've provided them with an opportunity in HB 352 to really target early literacy interventions and get this right early. Because when we close that gap early, the funding that we allocate to a child's life later reduces. So we want to get it right. So getting the assessment tool to screen the risk early is important, getting the right one early. So Craig, you want to add to that, Genevieve?
Yeah, I would add, so when I'm thinking about that question, which tool do I want? Part of that reasoning is which one do I not want?
Okay.
Right? Which to me would be the more important thing to be able to weed out which are the tools that are not going to reliably and accurately give us the information and identify these kids these students at an early age who are at risk. So then it gets a little bit more complicated when you think of all the different choices. And unfortunately, with a lot of options, some of these tools do a really good job of assessing some of these, but maybe they don't assess some of these other ones at all. Or one of them, there's a tool now that just focuses solely on oral language, and they seem to have gotten that down pretty good. So if I get that tool, then I'm not going to be able to assess these other things. So, I think for schools, it's going to depend on a lot of factors, the cost factor, being able to administer these tools sometimes is not, it's complicated. So a big part about reliability is how well someone can administer the tool, and there's, technical requirements often of these different tools. And if you don't follow those, you don't get the results. So, I think in an ideal world, I would really want schools to sit down and really think through this and pick the tool that, I don't know if it's if you're on the list, hopefully it's going to do a good job of identifying risk. And then some of these other factors come into play of how practical is this, how efficient is it? That's another technical definition of a screener, is that it should be efficient and it's not taking a lot of time to administer. And then, after that, then you have to score it and figure out the results, and there can be mistakes all along the way. So, it's a tough question to answer.
No.
So,
Well, I'm just thinking as a recovering school board member, I was trying to think about like, okay, well, how would our school district even figure out of this list even? Like, well, because we'd have to come up with, and I'm sure, as horrible as it sounds, I'm sure cost is a part of it. And that always is almost disappointing in a lot of ways. But trying to make sure that they, and I have full faith that they are knowledgeable enough to understand which one might provide the best insight and best evaluation for students in their district. I mean, I'm all about local control. I was just curious as to how you narrow that down, but I do appreciate your thoughts on that. Thank you. Yes, Member Quinlan.
I have a question that follows up on this one before we move on to the other questions. Is there anything about the screening tool that carries over to actually the classroom teacher when the kid starts the program? Is any of that information brought forward? You talked about it separating at risk or not at risk. Does the tool serve any other purposes?
So I think all of us can answer this with a similar response, but here's while we were speaking, my greatest desire is that we deeply understand how to instruct children in reading. And so great instruction can find the risk equal to a screener. When you'll find the 2 kids who really don't respond to instruction. That's what that screener should have found before you started instruction or during instruction. You see what I'm saying? So we need to have both aspects. We find the risk, but if you don't do anything with the risk, it was worthless. So the power and the promise of HB 352 is that we've set up the pathway to say we're building this out to say, let's find the risk and let's do something about it. And let's make sure our teachers have this knowledge they need to provide the instruction.
Well, I think just that point at the end is what I'm not clear on. Does the teacher actually get the information from the screener?
Most of the teachers are delivering the screener.
Okay.
Yeah, it just depends on the school district. Across Montana, we all work in schools. Some school districts have a assessment team that might be made up of teachers, school psychologists, a leader. Some just might say at this date to this date, teachers start giving your assessment. This is your assessment window, and all teachers deliver the assessment. But what Craig and we've worked collaboratively in schools, we really renorming those protocols every time, making sure everybody's giving it reliably and that you're getting that same reliable risk analysis every time. Because sometimes you forget how to give the assessment because it's not a daily protocol you're doing. But Craig, you want to add to that?
So in thinking about the different types of assessments, so as a screener, again, its main job is to identify at risk or not at risk. And you're wanting to do that efficiently because you're giving that to large numbers of students. So then the trade-off with that is when you get the result, it's not always clear, what direction you're going to go instructionally. And then that's where other assessments really come into play for classroom use, which would be a more, formal and informal diagnostic tools that then give you a clearer picture of specifically what a student knows and doesn't know. And then and so that's really what ends up guiding more of what you're going to do instructionally. So that's an important part of the equation. And then as is progress monitoring, and there is something on here to at least consider that. So once you identify if you're at risk, you want to know, from the instruction, then is this changing? Is this child still at risk? Are they growing? Are they not growing? So then we continue, can continue as the teacher to get more information, to keep guiding and altering your instruction to get eventually to hopefully get the positive outcomes that you want.
Mhm.
Genevieve, did you want to?
Nope, y'all nailed it.
I think a really positive way to think about this is that we're all very used to medical models. So we go to a doctor, everybody gets their temperature taken. That's just like, that's what this is. It's taking the temperature. Only some children go on to get diagnostics. That will be in their early development skills and alphabet knowledge, phonological development, word reading skills. Only some children go on to get deeper assessment. Those who screen at risk are those children. And that's where that targeted intervention would be. And that's where that teacher would become more specified in that process. And I think in all of our experiences, we hope the teacher is the greatest scientist in the classroom. And that's what we strive for.
Board Member Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A question along the same vein. As I look at the first page, I look at the number of areas or domains that a screener could address. And there's about 11 or 12 of them. Do any of the screeners address more than one? You talked a little bit about the oral language, only oral language. Well, if I have to have a screener for absolutely every single one of these, that's expensive. Do any screeners screen for more than one of these domains?
Yes.
Genevieve hasn't answered. I saw her nodding her head, and we're both online, so I vote she answers.
Yeah. Well, what we'd love to say to that is that all screeners looked at this entire developmental scope and sequence, and all screeners took into account all these things. But different publishers published different things, and they're doing it for different reasons. And so some are in the space of ages 3 to 5. Some have nailed 5 to 8. Some have nailed 8 to 18. And then what happens is that you don't have everything in one tool, but then you have to be very discerning in looking through the stats, because oftentimes they'll add on, oh yeah, we do that too. And you're like, but you never did that before. And so we try, by creating these checkpoints, it's safeguarding us against all of like which ones are going to do the best at which task, but most of them have multiple checkpoints that you're going to be able to check. Okay. Very few that are on the list are just checking one thing.
And generally there'll be, so you see the last item is the reading composite score. So whether it's reading or like really any of the assessments we use for psychometric purposes in schools will have composite scores. And then the reliability is often higher for the composite score because you have more pieces of information going into that with the multiple subtests or strands. And so ideally, I know that not, all of our school personnel are trained to do this, but one of the things we are hoping to get at with this rubric is like looking at all those pieces, right? Like what is the reliability of the composite score as well as the individual metrics within the assessment.
Thank you.
And Board Member Rasmussen, one thing I wanted just to know on your question, it's a really good one, and it's one of the conversations that we had at the Early Literacy Advisory Council table, was around the notion of what is the criteria for allowing a school district to choose their own assessment, and how can we do that knowing that, some of these assessments assess a number of areas, but not all of the areas. And so doing so, that's why we created that list of approved screening tools. And if you look, I know you print out your materials, so you probably don't have it in front of you, but on our webpage, we actually just created an early literacy tab because it feels like there's so many documents and things that we need to ensure that folks have access to. And one of those is that list of approved screening tools. And under each of those screening tools, it tells you exactly what they're assessing for. And so that's another sort of tool for school districts that when they're looking at it, they can really decide based on the information that is part of that list of approved screening tools. So I just wanted to make sure that you knew that we do have a place for that. I can send you more on that as well.
Are there any other questions for any other board members?
I have
Board
one more
Member Cro-
question. Thank you. Is there anything unique that you want to share with the board about serving American Indian students who might have less, more limited English proficiency, I guess, or that's not the right word for a 4-year-old, but I just want to see if there's any angles that you want to share with us.
I love the question. Thank you so much for asking it. I worked on the Crow with the Crow for a long time. And one of the things I really consider is development overall. So in any experience, I know many of our Montana schools are starting to have more and more multilingual learners, first language Spanish, first language Ukrainian, first language Mandarin. It's all over the place. So we have to be really cognizant of the fact that children aren't always speaking English when they come into an early learning environment. So would we test them in English right away? I always say no, until they develop enough language skills to be able to be screened in that language, then we can start screening them in that language. Hard in our native population. When I worked within the preschool, and also the kindergarten readiness centers for 7 years in Hardin and Crow Agency, we would find that less than 10% of our students actually spoke Crow as their first language. And that many children all were developing English language skills. And that what we found is that 95% of them with great instruction, and we did some of the screening protocols that are on here, met early kindergarten benchmarks. And it was really a profound and positive impact that we could see through 5th grade. So we would always wait to screen, but just teach and develop their language first and not just test children. So hopefully that helps answer part of that question. Do Genevieve and Craig want to answer too?
Genevieve just.
I would, yeah, I thank you for that question, because we had some conversation about that when we were developing the rubric. And I would echo my experience has been similar to Dr. Nell's. I was a bilingual school psychologist when I was working in California, and almost all of my referrals were multilingual students who spoke Spanish at home. And so I would assess in English and Spanish first to decide what language we would use for the rest of the Spanish or the rest of the evaluation. And almost always the students I was evaluating had low language in both languages. And so we did add a question at the end: can the assessment be given in English and Spanish? Because more and more assessments are being published. If they're in another language, they are in Spanish. But I think it's just really important to think about what we ended up having a conversation with in this group is the norms. And do we want to put something on the rubric around norm or representative norm sample, or do we want to give guidance to schools to be looking at a representative norm sample? And the reality is it's just really hard to find an assessment that's going to have a normative sample that's representative of a particular Native American tribe in Montana. So I think it's a tricky one. It's something we were definitely thinking about. And for me, I think it goes back to really helping our school communities understand what the assessments can and can't do and what a score does or doesn't mean, especially if it's not a great match between the normative sample for the assessment and your school population.
And some of those assessments do allow you. So when you first enter those scores and you're looking at where are these students in relation to national norms, and there's sometimes the ability to also look at that from a local norm. So you can see just within that population, what seems to be typical and who's on this side of typical and this side of typical. So the use of local norms can help.
I guess my question is, for in your discussions about students in Montana, I mean, are there any bias or kind of other unique issues for Montana that you want the board to be aware of?
So when you're assessing language, there's going to be bias. When you're assessing something like alphabet knowledge, then that is probably going to have less bias. And then, from instruction, you'll know whether that's making a difference or not. Even so, phonological awareness that you see on this list is a big predictor in that you're saying words out loud and students have to manipulate the sounds in those words. So if you have lower language skills or your first language is not English, that's something you would want to consider with that kind of tool as well. So, not necessarily that there would be bias, but that some of these, these words that they're hearing are not going to align with what they're typically used to hearing. So then you would be at a disadvantage.
Well, I think it's a very important question, and it's one that's happening in the science of reading community, that we're starting to really consider that the language we speak is our identity, and it's really important to acknowledge. What also is happening in the evidence is with many, many data points now is that while we might find this goes back to my own experience within Montana populations, subpopulations, that we find students who are generally developing English, right? And we tried not to say this is good or bad or any, it just is. It just is. And we're the teachers of English, and that is our job. And we're going to develop that. And what I'm loving in the research right now is that there's a large body. It had 5,200 children in it. They spoke multiple languages, and that the children who benefited most from language instruction, just structured language, oral language development, made a gain score of an effect size of a 0.5 versus those who were monolingual were at a 0.2. So they benefited even more from having great language instruction. So finding that risk, and it's not even a risk at that point, it's just, where are you in language development? Now let's develop your language. So hopefully these tools will help us be better at that, and not to say you're at risk. It's more about, oh, we get to develop your language, and that will be helpful. Mm-hmm.
Does any other board member have a question? So I just want to thank you so much for your time. Thank you for the work on this. This is terribly important. Anything we can do over and over to help our school districts identify tools that help then our students is imperative. So thank you so much. I greatly appreciate your time. To my board members, I would, on page 256, if you clicked on the link, list of approved evaluation methodology screening tools, that is actually what we'll be asking you to approve today, which with that, I will make a motion to approve the application and criteria for the list of approved screening tools as recommended.
Got a motion to approve the list of screening tools as recommended. Is there a second?
Second.
A second by member Quinlan. Any board discussion? Any questions on any of this? Any public comment? Seeing none, we'll proceed to a vote. All in favor of approving the list as presented signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
And Mr. Chair, that concludes the assessment committee.
All right. Thank you to the panel. Very interesting, and I appreciate your continued assistance in this area. Thank you. All right, we'll proceed with item number 8, which brings us back to reports, and we'll now have our student representative report. Mr. Mao.
Chair Tharp, thank you. Members of the board, I feel like the last 2 months in Montana were just exceptional for the well-being of students in Montana and student leaders. I'll start with our conference, MASC, which I'm sure you all are familiar with, held their conference this past Sunday through Tuesday, 17th through 19th. There were 550 kids in attendance, which marks 3 consecutive years since even before COVID of just record attendance. I mean, you can ask Director Anderson. He had been telling me that in his years in MASC before the conference, or before COVID, sorry, they would average probably like 300 to 350 kids, and now we're getting up into like the high 500s. I mean, it truly, it's incredible. It was a great time. The student councils of Laurel, Lockwood, and Bozeman Public Schools did a great job with it. So yeah, it was great. I'll talk about the resolutions that were brought up during that business session real fast. I won't get too much into it for a reason that I'll explain later. But one thing I did want to bring up was the most controversial resolution we voted on, which was recommending a mandatory cell phone ban in classrooms, but not before school, at lunch, or after school in all Montana public high schools to the board. And that passed 44 to 42. You might not expect that out of, kids our age, but I think we're at a point in time where student leaders especially are recognizing that these distractions are truly detrimental in classrooms, and they agreed to take away something which I think we all love a lot as high school students. But yeah, I'll talk more about the rest of those later. In addition, earlier this week, I attended NASB's students. Yeah, what's up?
I just wanted to ask you a quick question. When you have a vote of 42 to 44, so does each school get a vote?
Okay, yeah, I should clarify. So when we vote on that, each school gets 3 votes. They can split however they like, unless they have less than 3 members there, in which, if they have 2 people, they'll get 2 votes, 1 person, 1 vote. So yeah, that's divvied up based on schools, not by actual student population. But anyways, we had the first student advisory board, the first quarterly meeting this past Tuesday. It was pretty successful. I learned a lot of stuff about some of the other student reps and what they do nationwide. And what we were all introduced to in this first meeting was kind of this big overarching project that's going to be happening over the next 2 years. NASB formed the student advisory board to, they want that student voice at the national level, like you guys want here with me. And pretty much what the board decided on is that they're going to work on something similar to what I've been doing. They're advising student-centered policies to the board, and that starts with, what did they say? They're going to create policy proposals for NASB nationwide that will each be broken down individually to certain states, and that will be presented in July 2026. So this is something that I'm going to be working on for the next 3 meetings before I pass this off to whoever becomes the student representative next. Some of you are going to be here for that, and I think that's really exciting. I think it's really exciting stuff, and I'm excited to see what else happens as that process kicks off. Finally, I want to give you all an update on that student input survey. So I distributed that at the MASC conference. What I did is there's kind of a sheet I had kind of explaining to, it was either a school administrator or that school's advisor for student council, that I want you to, I'll leave it up to you, but preferably select 50 to 70 random students. And I'm going to have them answer this survey, which I've shared with you all before. I'd refreshed it a little bit to be a little more quantitative, just because with so many kids from around the state answering this, it's going to be really hard to go through each individual typed out response. But there is, still a section for that at the end where students can leave their concerns and any other comments to me and to all of you guys. I asked that they have all of that stuff in by the time that school's holiday break goes out. So I should have those results to you guys by the time we get back. I think I just checked. I think it was like 680 respondents so far. That's pretty good. It's a lot bigger than that pilot I ran at the beginning of the year. So I'm really looking forward to sharing those results to you guys in the future. There's one more thing I wanted to talk about that I forgot. At NASB, we were all presented with something that the California Student Advisory Board submitted to their state legislature. And what we did is we kind of took a comprehensive review of how people in this type of position should present ideas from student leaders to boards such as this. And I learned a couple things. I've never really shared any actual documents with you guys, so that's why I'm kind of holding on to these resolutions. Is I want to get everything in its exact language, how it was written. I want to get the authors, presenters, what the debate was, and then type all that out in a lot more formal sense than, you know, me just talking about it. And I'm going to share that with you guys, preferably in the next month. I asked McCall if maybe talking about that at the upcoming special meeting would be possible. But with that being said, I think that's all I have, and I'll stand for any questions that you guys have.
Yeah, your resolutions, who do you then present that to? Is that through the school administrators of Montana? Does that come to you, to us, or where do those go once you guys come up with a recommendation on behalf of the student bodies of Montana?
So those resolutions, it's up to Director Anderson and I really what to do with those. I, you know, with my position, obviously choose to share it with you guys. I want you guys to heavily take these into consideration. I mean, this is arguably the best time and place where you can get this big of a group of student leaders in Montana to talk about topics like this. And I think that's, you know, worth your serious consideration. As for who Director Anderson shares it with, I'm not sure, but this information does go up on MASC's website. It's accessible to anyone, but really my focus is making sure you guys hear these concerns.
And other than the cell phone, what was it? Can you give us another one or two of the
Yeah.
hot topics?
Yeah. So that was the longest one. I talked a little bit about how that cell phone one was our fourth resolution. It took twice as much as the previous three combined to finish debate on. But another one that was a little pretentious was requiring Montana schools to conduct first semester finals before winter break commences. That was something that was brought up. I really want to ask Denton, who was the writer of that resolution, kind of to specify a little more, because I never received that full page. I was just typing out results as I heard it. Let's see, cell phone ban. Requiring weighted GPAs in all Montana public high schools was one that passed 54-32. Oh, and I should mention that requiring the first semester finals did pass. That was a 42-38 vote. Those were the three that were really, you know, within like a 10% difference. Everything else was usually just like a landslide, yes or no.
Board members with questions for Gavin?
Mr. Chair.
Please.
So first of all, Gavin, thank you. Thank you for the work on it. 600 plus for a survey result. That's phenomenal. I can't wait to see the results. So thank you so much for the work on that.
Oh yeah.
Thank you also for work on these resolutions. I'm curious because we just toured the Bridger Charter Academy and learned that in Bozeman High School, they do have that cell phone requirement where they're not in instructional spaces being used and things. What was your thought on that? Like when you heard that and is that happening at your home institution?
So yeah, no, I'd love to talk about that. I'll start by saying at Capitol High, there's no really policy in place about cell phones, which I think was kind of strange because I remember in middle school, it was a cell phone ban. And then when I came up to high school, they relaxed it a bit. It's just, yeah, do whatever you want with it. But our principal leaves it up to each individual teacher. I know freshmen usually aren't allowed to have their phones on them as much. They got to keep it in their bag or in like a phone cubby or something. But I think that the conversation, you know, it passed in this resolution, but a lot of the debate was about like the specifics. I feel like a lot of kids, when they first heard that, were thinking like, you are not looking at your phone from when you walk into school to when you leave. And I don't think that's the case in a lot of these schools that have a cell phone ban. I mean, you can use it at lunch usually in the halls, just like the superintendent said, not during instructional time, which is what it should be. A lot of the students I know feel the same way. I mean, I'm on my phone more than I should be in class, and you know, I know, I'm sorry. I'm not perfect. And from some of the schools that shared their opinions at that conference that did put a cell phone ban in place, it was always just that, those first 2 weeks, it's like, you're in your withdrawals of like an addiction. It's terrible and everyone hates it and we all got to go back. But after that, everyone seems to recognize that, this is a good thing. Everyone's grades are doing better. Everyone's concentration and social skills are doing better. This is like necessary. Yeah.
Any other questions? All right, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the things that you all asked me to do at our last board meeting was to work with Gavin and some of his colleagues to think about the math requirements. And so I did join one of their regularly scheduled meetings and had a conversation with some of his colleagues around the 3 years of math, and all of them on the call already were required to take 3 years. And so it looks like Gavin might want to say a little bit more about that. So go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for reminding me that, because I was just about to skip that. That was one of the resolutions that we voted on. And that passed. It was raising the statewide minimum number of mathematics credits from 2 to 3. I mean, there was a good debate about it that lasted like 20 minutes or so. But that passed 69 to 17. So most of the kids were in support of that.
Is there any way that we can keep you from going to the academy next year and have get another year of work out of you?
No. I will mention, in my speech, because every outgoing rep will give their speech at the MASC conference. I mean, already it seems like there were a lot of great candidates that were interested, and I'm really excited to see what the selection process will be like. If I remember correctly, there have been 17 individual people who have emailed, texted me so far about the position. So you guys will have a great person doing this job next year.
You and your predecessor have both set the bar pretty high. So,
well, thank you. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you. Let's move on to item number 9, which is our HiSET report. And we have Katie online.
Yep, she's just coming in.
All right. Katie, take her away. And board members, we're on page 261 of your 1,000+ page packet.
All right, thanks. Thanks, Chair Tharp, members of the board. Thanks for having me today. I actually have some slides if I can have permission to share my screen.
You should have permission, Katie.
Okay, let's see. All right, can you see that?
Yeah, we've got you.
Okay. So, good afternoon. My name is Katie Madsen. I am the Adult Education State Director and the High School Equivalency State Administrator at the Office of Public Instruction in Helena. All right, so today I'm here to provide you with a high-level summary and overview of high school equivalency in Montana. Prior to today, you received the written report in your board packet. Just a reminder, and I know I touched on this last year, those of you that were there probably remember that we discussed the HiSET transition from one vendor to another vendor in October of 22. So just wanted to note that again here this year. We're still having some transitional challenges, which again, I spoke about last year in my report. But so going from ETS to PSI, so one vendor to the next, we've had challenges with customer service, communications, receiving official data. It's important to note that our testing numbers and data has returned to pretty pre-transition numbers, so before we went to PSI, but the OPI adult education staff is spending significantly more time and effort, still trying to mitigate these challenges, advocate for opportunities, and ensure compliance with our state's high school equivalency requirements, and that's predominantly related to ARM and underage testing requirements, so that's 16 to 18-year-old range. All right, so HiSET had been the sole equivalency exam in Montana since 2024. We, as an agency, the OPI, pursued the return of GED testing, and that testing officially launched in January of 24. This allows choice for our prospective testers, our stakeholders, constituents, strengthens, shepherds the field, gives adult educators and testing centers additional options and opportunities to serve the citizens of Montana. So as of earlier this month, here is a breakdown of where we're at with GED. So we have 604 tester accounts created. So individuals are hearing that we have GED, they're searching for it on the website, they're creating accounts on GED.com. We've had some test takers. So we've had 36 test takers, 25 of those individuals have completed the test, and 23 of them have passed the test. So our numbers are small, but mighty. Most, you see most of our completers are passing there, so that's great news. But individuals are finding the GED exam, and they are searching it out, creating those accounts, and then moving forward with the test. So in coming years, we expect those numbers to increase as time goes on. Pleased to share that HiSET completers in Montana, the passing rates have remained fairly consistent. So this is just a snippet of what was provided in the written report. As you see, again, fairly consistent numbers. We are back as far as overall testing numbers for HiSET. We're back to pre-pandemic, so before COVID numbers. So the state has rebounded as a whole. That passing rate still remains over 80% on the best attempt, which is a high percentage, which is great. We have had 140 examinees in 2023 that had previously tested on the HiSET, so prior to 23, and they failed, and then retested in program year or in calendar year 23, and then 84% of those examinees passed in 23. So that's important to know. All right, I just want to take a moment to talk about the agency OPI's commitment to serving non-traditional learners in Montana via a variety of educational pathways. The high school equivalency, which is what I'm here to talk about today, serves as an integral component at our agency and in our partnerships with other entities in the state that provide these alternative educational pathways and opportunities for non-traditional learners. So again, these are our learners that are typically 16 years and older. They are the ones that are struggling in school, the ones at risk of dropping out, you know, some of our like emancipated minors. These are really the group of individuals that are not our traditional student and need some additional pathways in order to be successful. So our agency is committed to providing opportunities for those non-traditional learners. So we have the WIOA Title II Adult Education Program. High school equivalency is used in that program. We use high school equivalency in the HiSET Options program. So that's the high school equivalency test is used as a measure of proficiency. However, that program is offered to credit deficient seniors. So we'll get into that in just a minute. Youth Challenge, we partner with them, high school equivalency exam, Job Corps, correctional facilities, treatment centers. And then, of course, we partner with our test centers across the state. GED, HiSET, and Diploma Center are our third-party vendors that support high school equivalency as well. So just want to touch a little bit on these alternative pathway areas. So first we've got WIOA Title II, Adult Education. So these programs provide opportunities for those non-traditional learners to increase and strengthen the skills they need to be successful ultimately. So that's employment, earning the HSE, entering post-secondary ed or training, getting those industry recognized credentials. We serve a significant amount of English language learners, especially in those communities that have high number of refugee populations. So Missoula and Flathead, for example. We're helping those individuals with their English skills, helping them learn about, American government, strengthening their understanding, responsibilities of citizenship. So a lot going on in adult education. I'd like to take a moment to recognize we have 90 plus WIOA adult education staff throughout the state, and all the work they do to help our clients, individuals, these non-traditional learners, prepare for high school equivalency. Over 1,400 of our WIOA adult ed participants attempted at least one HSE subtest in 23. We have approximately 750 participants who passed the complete battery and earned their high school equivalency credential in 2023. And then about 50% of our high school equivalency testers in Montana overall participate in a WIOA adult education program. All right, so high school equivalency is often what brings non-traditional learners to adult education. It is the basis of our business, basis of our programs. It's the stepping stone on that non-traditional pathway to helping these individuals be self-sufficient. But adult education goes beyond high school equivalency. So it might be the starting point, but it's not the end result for many of our clients. So we offer integrated education and training, robust training opportunities that lead to post-secondary or industry recognized credentials and certifications. So that might be the CDL, CNA, phlebotomy. We have childcare pathways. So that's just a couple examples. We also offer workplace literacy programs. These are completely driven by the employer needs in the communities. Employers are working with adult ed to create these programs that work towards helping their existing employees increase their skills to become more productive in the current jobs they have. And I also want to note and highlight that Montana's WIOA adult education programs consistently rank high in the nation for performance outcome measures. And so when I say high in the nation compared to, the other 50 states, and they're in the top quartile of performance measures. So that's really outstanding highlight. All right, so I spoke a bit about HiSET options programs a bit earlier in the presentation, got a little bit ahead of myself there. So the high school equivalency exam, or HiSET in particular in this case, is used in the high schools. It's an opportunity for credit deficient seniors to stay in school and graduate with their cohort. And then they don't earn the HSE, they earn the traditional high school diploma. Again, the high school equivalency exam is just the mode of proficiency or measure of proficiency, but they get the traditional high school diploma. These HiSET options programs also have a career and college readiness component. Again, goes beyond the high school diploma, propelling students on a successful trajectory. Over the past 4 years, I want to share some data with you. So on average, 10 high schools have participated in the HiSET options program across the state. Approximately 420 students had the opportunity to stay in school, work towards graduating on time with their peers. Out of that 420, 320, so roughly 76 of them were successful in the HiSET Options program, completing it, passing the HSE exam, and then of course earning that traditional high school diploma. Excited to share that Montana's HiSET Options program is growing. That is much due to the significant time and effort that adult education staff at the OPI has spent to really kind of give this program some love, and it is needed, and we want to see it in see it in our schools. Again, it's just another pathway for these non-traditional learners. And so we had created a task force to review guidelines, implement accountability and monitoring components. We're working on developing a hub course to promote the HiSET Options program, share information about what it is, how schools can get involved, and then provide professional development for our programs that are established already. We are anticipating about 15 schools to participate this year. So we've got some pending applications that we're in the process of reviewing. So by the time we get through the end of the academic year in, late May, June, we're anticipating 15 participating schools. Again, just another pathway for these non-traditional learners to get to graduation, which is exciting. As I mentioned, we partner with Youth Challenge Academy. Again, they serve youth that are at risk of dropping out of school or not graduating at their local high schools. They go to Youth Challenge, and then Youth Challenge partners with the OPI to offer pathways for these cadets at Youth Challenge. So they have an opportunity to earn the HSE diploma, high school equivalency. They can get the traditional high school diploma or a state proficiency diploma from the superintendent of public instruction. So some data for you. In 2023, 79 cadets at Montana Youth Challenge earned that high school equivalency diploma. 26 of them in 23 earned their high school diploma. So that's that's a diploma from their home school or their resident school where they came from. That's via Senate Bill 197. And then we also had 15 in 2023 that earned superintendent's state proficiency diploma via House Bill 556. We also partner with the Job Corps, correctional facilities, treatment centers, opportunities, again, for our non-traditional learners to continue on their educational pursuits, even if there might be a hiccup in that. And, so for our inmates, we're providing those educational opportunities. Here's just a list of some of those facilities and where we have testing, high school equivalency testing for these individuals. And on the right-hand side there, the picture. So that's a picture from the fall graduation at Montana Women's Prison. A few of us from the OPI were able to attend the HiSET graduation ceremony, which was very powerful to see, just these inmates that have been working towards this, and to see their success and their excitement, and just moving forward on that successful path. So powerful experience, and the high school equivalency and adult education provides those opportunities. Then of course we partner with, as I said, high school equivalency testing centers in the state. So these testing centers provide opportunities to offer GED and HiSET testing to our stakeholders and folks seeking that credential in Montana. We have 21 public test centers, including 6 tribal locations. We have 15 non-public testing locations. So that was on that previous slide, those corrections, treatment centers, Youth Challenge, those things, those are the non-public testing opportunities. And then we have online proctored testing as well. And I'd just like to end on recognizing our 50 chief examiners and test administrators across the state at our high school equivalency test centers. They go through an approval process, they go through training. They offer testing for individuals, sometimes multiple times a month. So they provide a lot of support for these non-traditional learners, and I just like to recognize them as well. And so with that, I will stand for questions.
Thank you, Katie. What's the advantage of having both HiSET and GED? Is there a population that's better served by one or the other?
I would say no, it's just choice. Gives our folks an option. GED does, as far as some of the resources and things they have available. They have some, for example, more detailed score reports, that if students take practice tests that are directly linked to curriculum being used, and like pinpoint, you use this book and you go to this page, and that's the skill that needs to be worked on. So some prep pieces that are, I would say, I guess, more robust or more in depth. So it just gives testers and then our adult ed programs that are prepping these folks for the test, whether it's GED or HiSET, we're prepping these folks the same way. It's still tied to standards, and curriculum is aligned and all of that. So just choice. And then I guess I want to talk about when there was the transition, the states that had GED on board when HiSET went through the transition fared much better throughout that process, because there wasn't another test available for their, I guess, continuity of services, if that makes sense.
And a follow-up, then, are all of your examiners able to offer either one of those tests?
So yes, so our high school or our HiSET test centers were pre-approved. If they wanted to move forward with GED testing, then they just had to go through the GED process. So they were pre-approved with the state, and then they went through the process with GED. Not all of them are on board. It's been a slow process, but we have about 4 or 5 in the state that are up and going and ready. The majority of the GED testers that I shared with that data at the beginning, those are primarily online testers, but we are starting to see testers come into our test centers. Again, GED, I guess, is kind of the household name. So even when people were calling us and talking to us about HiSET, they still said GED. And so we definitely have folks that are looking specifically for that credential, and our bordering states, for example, they're GED states. So again, just another tool in the tool bag.
Thank you. Any other board members? Any questions for Katie? None? All right. Well, thank you so much. Very interesting. And it's interesting to the different options. I'd be curious about a disaggregation later about, who's choosing HiSET versus GED and the difference in that. So, all right.
All right.
Thank you very much, Katie. All right, let's moving on to item numbers 10 through 14 are all part of our charter committee. So I'm going to hand things over to our charter committee chair, Jane.
Okay. We're really at an exciting time now because we're getting ready for the next legislative session. And we have our first reports from the last round of our charter schools, and we have 11 new applicants. So we've got a lot of things to talk about. First of all, we look to an update on the Community Choice School Commission. They've been making great progress since the last legislative session under the leadership of Trish Schreiber. I see you up there, Trish, ready to give us a report. Good day to you.
I am ready. Good day.
Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone, and chair and board members. I'm Trish Schreiber, chair of the Community Choice Schools Commission. Thank you for providing this time for me to share an update for the commission with you. So since the September update provided to the board, the commission has continued to stay very active. In September, the commission recognized a milestone. It's been a full year since the commission first assembled, and that felt like a bit of an accomplishment all on its own. And while the commission has completed a substantial amount of work in preparing the state for choice school chartering, the reality of the matter is that professional help is needed. So a little more on this later in the report. But in the meantime, the commission has had to rely solely on 7-member volunteer board, 2 active subcommittees, a statewide and nationwide volunteer steering committee, and the goodwill of national chartering partners to provide us with sample resources, guidance, and training. And we are very grateful for all of this volunteer effort that Montana has inspired really throughout the country. So we feel really good about that. Nevertheless, the commission is nearing the end of phase 3 of 7 phases of implementation. So phase 3 is focused on developing transparent, reliable, consistent, and nationally accepted criteria and metrics to guide professional decision-making for choice school and authorizer applications. And as the board no doubt understands now, that professional decision-making is a large part of chartering as the commission is entering its 2nd year of implementation, they will continue the charter training work at their public meetings, where, by the way, all the information is archived for anyone in the state who would like to learn about chartering, and we welcome everyone to dip into those recordings. The fundraising committee has continued its work on applying for private grants, and I am happy to announce that the commission just received word of acceptance of a major grant. So the commission has been awarded $300,000 to use in the next 12 months to complete the implementation of the law so that the state is fully prepared for choice school chartering at the end of 2025. So the commission plans on hiring a director to lead this work and to contract with consultants for the rest. The terms of the grant are for 1 year, so the fundraising team is still hard at work building relationships with philanthropists both throughout the state and the country in order to diversify the donor pool and to prepare for funding for 2026. In the commission's last report, I announced a date for oral arguments in Judge Abbott's courtroom for November 8th, but that was delayed and rescheduled due to a criminal case that takes priority over civil lawsuits. So now the oral arguments are on the calendar for Wednesday, January 15th at 1:30 p.m. The commission's next steps are as follows. On December 5th, the Volunteer Steering Committee will meet on Zoom to provide feedback on the materials for evaluating choice school applications. The information for this meeting will be posted on the BPE website under the Choice Schools tab, and this meeting is, of course, open to the public. And if someone would like to join, McCall or Chris can provide the Zoom link. The commission will meet on December 17th at the Capitol for the 4th quarter meeting. And the goal for this meeting is to finish mapping out the commission's core values and strategic vision for chartering, an exercise that the commission started in April but needs to be finished. And also the professional development will continue for the commission in the coming year with a focus on preparing for proper oversight of schools, including the renewal or non-renewal process, and developing policies to support all of that. And as I mentioned earlier, we plan to hire a director who will lead the commission in finishing all 7 phases of implementation and begin the work of preparing workshops and resources to help support founding boards in fully understanding the law, the commission's policies, and how to navigate the application and the renewal cycles. And that concludes the commission's report, and I'm happy to stand for any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Board members have questions? Madeline?
Sorry. Trish, what was the source of the $300,000 grant?
So it was granted to us through the Lined and Harry Bradley Foundation, and they are a private foundation. Education is one of their major pillars that they support throughout the nation. And we're like ecstatic about this because this is a very, very hard grant to get. And we worked really hard on it. And so we're kind of like patting ourselves on the back a little.
Congratulations, it's very exciting. Do we
Yeah.
have a conflict on, you mentioned December 17th meeting, did you?
Yes, that's correct.
Is that a conflict with our board meeting?
Madam Chair, that's the next meeting that the commission is going to hold. The day before that is actually the Education Interim Budget Committee that I had mentioned. So they're hoping to coordinate with that. And that's why they're meeting the 17th. They'll be in the Capitol.
Okay. I want to make sure we didn't have a conflict. Are there other questions for Trish? Seeing none, we applaud you and say congratulations again. Wonderful news, yes.
Well, thank you so much. And thanks for all your support and allowing us to report to you guys on a regular basis. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. So item 11 then is the fall data that we have, and we get to invite Christy Moxness to come up. Christy. We're excited to hear what you have to say about the review of this information. It's on page 71.
I think it's on page
271, 270. Okay, take it away.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair Hammond, Chair Tharp, and members of the board. Good afternoon. I'm Christy Mockstutz, MOCK-STUTZ, and I am the Assistant Chief Program Officer at the Office of Public Instruction. And before you on page 271, you have the public charter school fall enrollment counts. This is just sort of, think of it as kind of a progress report, as you will, because as you know, the annual number of belonging is an average count from the fall count to that spring count that will happen in February. So this is just a report to you to give you an update on those enrollment counts as they're happening right now at this fall count point. So let me take a look and start here at that first table, just so you can see what that table information has for you. Obviously, the basic entitlement is applied to these charter schools per the law, and it is based upon their elementary, middle, or high school grade levels, depends on the amount of funding that they get. And their grade levels were determined in their application materials to you as to what grade levels they'll be servicing in those charter schools. And then in their opening documentation to us, they included that information as well. And so what you can see in this first chart, it has the district name, the school name, the budget unit, and you'll notice that the E stands for elementary, the M for middle, and H for high school. So that's that budget unit coding there. I shared the district initial anticipated A and B so that you would have an idea of what they thought they were going to have as they opened these schools. The amount of a basic entitlement that they got based upon those enrollment numbers, then what their fall student count report count was for A and B, and then the over or under the requirement there, because they do have to meet a minimum threshold for that basic entitlement. So you can see there. And our school finance unit did send out letters to the schools indicating their fall enrollment and kind of saying, oh, we noticed that you might be here at this point in the fall, you might be under that 40. You need to make sure that by the spring you're averaging out to that number so that you'll be eligible for that basic entitlement. So we did send out a follow-up letter to these schools at this point. A couple of the schools didn't receive a basic entitlement. You'll see the Missoula Connect Academy on the next page is a good example of that. They have an elementary and middle school, but they didn't really anticipate many elementary students in their anticipated enrollment. They might be serving a few in the grade levels, but they didn't anticipate many and they didn't get that basic entitlement. So you'll see that's why there's a dash there in that funding source. And that's what that indicates. For the table 2, with the charter schools, and I think this morning's visit to Bridger Charter here in Bozeman was a really great example of the flexibilities that this charter school law has allowed some of our schools. And that sort of partial enrollment of students being able to be enrolled in a charter school, but also having support from maybe the other high school that's already in that district, because all of these charter schools are in existing districts already. And I think we saw a really good example of that. And what the second chart is, it just sort of shows you what the full and part-time enrollment numbers are in the various charter schools. And I've highlighted in yellow, those are actually the new charter school budget units. So if you see the E2s, E3s, the H2s, H3s, H4s, those are the new charter schools. I've coded them yellow just for your convenience. The E1s were those existing budget units already for those schools in those districts. And so that's that differentiation there. And so you can see the numbers. And as the superintendent here in Bozeman discussed this morning, they have around 100 students in that Bozeman Charter High School, and you can see that reflected there. And then there are some partial enrollments, the way he exactly talked about that flexibility maybe of being partially enrolled for some of those other courses that they needed. So you can see that reflected in the numbers there. And as you look at some of the other numbers, some of the schools, when you look at Corvallis, for example, you see the 643 in their original elementary 1 unit and the 645 in their new charter school. So that's not being double counted, because you see in parentheses that smaller number, those are partial enrollments, but all of their students are partially enrolled in both schools. And so you can see those numbers there. That's what that indicates. And I think that is all I wanted to explain, but I'm happy to answer questions, and Paul Taylor is on the line to also answer questions. If you have specific fiscal questions, he'll be able to jump in and help out.
Thank you very much, Christy.
Yeah.
Questions?
Yes, I really want to dig deep into the weeds on this one, so I'm glad Paul is on. Okay, so this morning when we were over at Gallatin, we met some students that were told, okay, they're in the Gallatin for 2 periods a day, which means that the rest of the day is as part of Bozeman High School. How are those part-time, not FTE, but A and B, how are they split up? I mean, is Gallatin getting a certain percentage and then Bozeman High getting a certain percentage? How do those numbers all play out to come up with the total A and B count? That's probably for you, Paul.
That's probably for Paul, but I can give it a shot.
I'll let you give it a shot first, Christy.
Okay. Thanks, Paul. Well, and so the A and B percentages are quarter percentages. So there's 25, 50, 75, and up to 100% in the A and B calculation. And so for, in that instance, if a student is split, we did send out sort of a guidance document that, up to 25% would be at that home school where that 25% or those 2 classes were, for example, and the rest would be at that other high school in this case. So that partial enrollment would be divided up in that way, as close to the 25, 50, 75 as possible. So I hope that makes sense.
All right, so we're not splitting them too precisely. We're just going by quarters, and so
we're going by quarters because that was the existing. Yeah, that's the existing.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, my name is Paul Taylor. I work at the Office of Public Instruction, and I do a little bit with calculation of A and B and distribution of schools. The guidance that was modified and adjusted for that advice was to report students as accurately as you can to represent the proportion at which they're attending at each location. The reason it rolls to the quarter, half, 3/4, and full is because that's the aggregate hour representation, and that is the basic breakout of how we count kids when we consider converting the enrollment to student count for A and B, and then the calculation of average number belonging. So that's the purpose behind that.
As a follow-up, Madam Chair, what about the schools that have had some difficulty with breaking those up? Where is the difficulty lying in that? Because it seems clear that one body is only going to add up to a 1. And so where's the confusion and what do we need to do to assist those schools that seem to have difficulty with this report?
Christy, do you want to go first or you want me to go first?
Sure. I think the initial the 2 out of 7 periods, how does that equal and how does that get into the 25, 50, 75? So I think initially it was really just making those numbers match. And so we came up with what Paul said. It's like, try to get it the most representative of their time spent in those schools. And that, I think that helped to clear up some of the confusion. And then, and we really just work with schools. Again, the school this morning, the Bridger Charter, was a really good example of, being able to provide that flexibility for the schools so that the students are in that charter school for that time they need, getting that instruction they need there, but then having that other support. I think that's just a really good example of where their main instruction is happening, in that charter school.
And if I may, as a follow-up,
Please.
the guidance that's been provided is essentially, yes, please count the students at the location that they are attending for the proportion of time that they're attending. So in the case of, if it's an 8-class day and it was 2 classes at the charter, that would be 0.25 and 0.75, 75%. There is concern, however, in a few isolated instances that you want to make sure that you are representing students as accurately as possible, because you don't want to say that the student's representing a half at one place and a half at another when that's not actually the representation that should be portrayed. Madam Chair.
Thank you. How do we know which representation is being reported?
I'd say that, and honestly, I'm not actually the expert in this. Nicole Thuot's probably best to answer these types of questions. But my understanding of the Infinite Campus system, which is the non-fiscal data collection tool at the OPI currently, districts are required to put calendars into the system that also hold the classes and the number of hours to be enrolled in each one of those classes. The split out to identify the classes and calendars for charters and those that are split and represented for the regular school should parallel how students are being reported into that system. And I think most districts heard the message, and I think that there's an isolated situation that maybe, and I'm afraid to say too much, but maybe there's a misunderstanding.
Thank you. And so would we assume that you will follow up on such misunderstandings?
Yes, we are following up and working
All right.
with the school.
Thank you. Anything else? Yes.
So I remember, I'm blown away by some of the numbers. I mean, they predicted,
Yeah.
they predicted 30, 40, and they got 300. So when I think of that, are we tracking anything of new captured A and B as opposed to just reallocated A and B? So, because I remember reading through these applications, many of them, as I recall, were trying to recapture some homeschool population, right? So are we tracking that at all, just to have a basic idea that, hey, this school district's been able to fight its way back into that market for those individuals?
Yes, please.
Yes, Board Member Slinger, we do have some of that information. I know, for example, that in Corvallis, their distance school were new enrollments to their school district. So we were able to do that. I don't have that necessarily for all of them, but I do know that particular one was a lot of new enrollments make up that enrollment count for that. And with some more data digging, we could maybe find out some more of those new enrollment information.
As a follow-up, I would be interesting, Chairman, to have that data. I think it'd be fascinating to me, because you know, I think about it, okay, we have another unit and I fully recognize that it's what's best for the student and that learner, right? But if I am ex high school and I'm now splitting out 200 of my FTE or my, sorry, higher ed term, A and B, to just a new unit, you know, within that, it's limiting that 200 resource, A and B resource in my existing. So, so for me, it's about how do you capture or recapture A and B that's been lost. So, okay, thank you.
If I may, as a sort of rough, before you're provided any data, on the OPI website is an area for school finance, and in that area is a tab called budgets. And in that fallout is a thing called preliminary budget data sheets. And just as a rough, so you can get sort of a somewhat decent feel, is you can look at the preliminary budget data sheet A and Bs from the 24 version and compare it to the 25 version. And you may note that in a lot of cases, and I'm not saying this as a factual statement too much, you can literally see the A and B drop from the one budget unit and add at the newly created charter school budget unit. But to drill into actual data, I think the way to do it would be, once again, I think unfortunately this is going to fall on Nicole. You could get the SEIDs for the students that attend the school district from the prior year and see where they were attending, and you can do the same thing now. I'd say, though, that there's a unique situation, too, that many of the charter schools, the attendance is a portion of the day, and then the remainder of the day is at the regular education setting. So in those situations, I think you just see a shifting more than a capturing of new students. But I think it's a good activity to dig into and see if we are capturing students back from home or private school situations.
Right. Follow-up questions, anybody? I have a question. Oh, man.
Thank you. Hi, Paul. It's great to see you. I think this question is actually for Christy. I'm confused between table 1 and table 2 for some of these numbers. I'm looking at Helena Elementary specifically, and I can see that your yellow highlighted spaces, the number of A and B anticipated for the Montessori program, which is budget unit E3, is 198, which is the same number as in table 1. It's also and in table 2, but other ones don't add up or don't tie back to table 1. So tell me, what are we looking at in table 2? Are these actual October, first Monday in October numbers?
And in fact, Paul might need to jump in here, but they are the fall student count. For example, if you look at Corvallis Rise Charter Pathways, that's E3 for Corvallis. And you see that 262 in the E3 yellow box on table 2. You see the 645, that's the difference between the 382, the 645, the 262. So it ends up being that final, it would be that final A and B count, full student A and B for that school based on those partial enrollments in that particular budget
Partial,
unit.
okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
It's
So
a
it's
little
enrollment.
confusing.
Okay,
Yeah,
right.
it's a little confusing, but
Thank you.
hopefully that clarified.
Thank you. Any further questions, comments? All right, thank you very much, Christy. We appreciate your help with this. And then moving on to where we're going now, we have 11 new applications. They're on page 273 in your packet. And we had a committee meeting a couple of weeks ago, early this month. When we looked at those, we decided that we would ask each board member between now and the January meeting, at least, to read all 11 of those and to get prepared. And then we decided, we tried to have 2 half days, 'cause a whole day of public comment wears us out. So, but we couldn't find find multiple days when all of us were free. So we selected December 11th for a full day meeting, when the charter applicants will be able to make a brief presentation and we can ask them questions. And the members of the charter committee will ask the first question. We ask all of you to ask follow-up questions or additional questions based on your reading and your review of that application. So now, moving on, if there's anything question about that, and you haven't any heart attacks about over the holidays reading 11 applications. Okay, I hear they're pretty good. I've only looked at a few of them, but yesterday Angela was talking about it and she said she thought there was some outstanding applications among them. So she's reading ahead of me. So now, McCall, you have some things you wanted to add.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. I would note in your board packet on page 275 is a list of each of those applications this year. Again, as Board Member Hammond said, there are 11 of them. They're actually linked to where they are on our webpage, so you can get access to each of those through there, or again, under the Public Charter School tab on our webpage, you can find all 11 of them as well. Madam Chair, I really wanted to take some time. This is one thing we didn't do last year, and I found myself answering a lot of questions about it. And so I thought it would be a really good opportunity for us to have sort of a conversation around best practices or reviewing, the application and the criteria. Certainly, there's been a lot of work that has been done on both the application and criteria to get us where we are today. If you look on page 277 of your packet, that's where you'll find the application. The application itself hasn't actually changed that much, and that's because most of the language that's in the application is prescriptive from the law. And so all of those questions that we're asking each of our public charter schools are in there because it's based off of the language that came to us from House Bill 549. Additionally, on page 285 of your packet is the criteria, which also both of these documents were available on June 1st. Remember, that is also a statutory requirement that we have each of these documents available to the public by June 1st each year. The application and criteria really mirror one another. Last year, I would say that wasn't quite the case. Our criteria document, I think, was a little harder to follow for board members. But this year, they are truly side by side. Sections of the application match directly sections of the criteria. I know that was, like I said, one of the challenges last year. So we really wanted to make sure that those documents actually worked together. And as you're looking through the applications, it should be easy to follow on your criteria document. Now, on that same point, I will tell you that we received some applications that didn't use the application format that we actually created, and instead maybe created a totally separate application or, just wrote something separate, like in a narrative. And so, it may be a little difficult to follow, but hopefully it's in similar layout, so you should be able to follow it. I will note that in the submission procedures, we were very clear that districts were to provide a brief, direct response to each of the questions. They had 26 pages for the actual meat of the questions, for the responses to the questions we asked. We know most of the applications that we received were from school districts, so things like their policy manuals, their calendars, their org charts. Those are things that we expect them to have and they've been operating under thus far. And so maybe a little less important for this board to spend a lot of time on those. But we do have an applicant that would be a sort of Route 2 applicant. And so want you to start thinking about all of those things that I just mentioned will be new for them and what that looks like as far as them creating that information. I will say, as you're looking at these, use your best judgment when reviewing the applications. Try to do your best to find all of those sections. But like I said, not all of them use the application exactly. So if you can't find some info or it's not clear where it's at, you should definitely note that on your criteria document, and hopefully we can work together and share if other folks found that information and where they might have found it. Again, like Board Member Hammond said, each board member is going to evaluate each one of the 11 charter applications. I know that sounds like a lot, but last year you did 7, so it's basically the same, right? Most board members did 7, though I'm sure Board Member Hammond did all 26. So it should be a little bit more manageable this year, but I also think that that gives us better data when we're going to our spreadsheet that we used last year and we're thinking through what your responses were. The more of you that evaluate each of the proposals, the better data we're actually going to get and the better conversations we're going to have. So as much as I think it is definitely tedious, I think it'll be better for the board and better for the analysis. Madam Chair, I want to turn it back to you and see what questions board members have. Maybe you want to talk a little bit about how we incorporated that checklist into sort of the major parts of the criteria from last year. So that's one document now and not 2.
Right.
Since we are required to use the criteria, we wanted to make sure that that was integrated. So I'll turn it back to you to talk about that and see what other questions there are.
Okay. Are there any questions at this point in time? Well, we asked the staff and they worked very carefully to put together all of the criteria from the statute together with the second questionnaire that we had last time. So it's one document on 2 pages for us to use for each of the 11. I think it's much easier. Did anyone have any questions on that or additional input? We appreciate it. Who was the lead on that, McCall or Jenny? Putting it together. Jenny?
For Jenny's sake, she wasn't quite here yet. When we had to put this together, we had to have it out by June 1st and she
Okay.
didn't come to us till September. So
Okay.
yep.
Yeah, well, thank you, McCall, and for your work. It's very well done. Okay,
Madam Chair?
yes.
I guess, Executive Director Flynn, can you share with the rest of the board that doesn't have daily contact with you exactly how we have integrated Jenny into this process and what her job tasks have been?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And we're really excited to have Jenny join us today. She was able to come over and do the tour of Bridger Charter Academy. And that's one of the things that we've been doing this year, as well as one of the requirements in our contracts was that we would visit in person each of the public charter schools in the first year. So we did quite a few this fall. We'll do quite a few in the spring as well. So thank you, Jenny, for coming over for that. Jenny has been really integral in helping us in the office and especially helping me really think through some of those requirements that were part of the contracts from year 1. So, I mean, not even thinking about year 2 yet, she's really been devoting her time and energy on all of the things from year 1. Think about all of the quarterly financial reports that we've required. She's really been the one coordinating and working with school districts to ensure that they understand what needs to come to our office. She's also been working on the performance framework, school and mission specific goals. Actually, we sent off that list to you. Each of our public charter schools was required to send us between 1 and 3 sort of personal school goals around how they're going to measure success. So Jenny really compiled all of those, sent them off to you. Jenny's also been working on getting information, or each school has to send us their most recent audit. They're also required to send us their most recent proof of insurance. So just really communicating and coordinating with districts in a way that I have not done well. And so it's really great to have her in that position. She's also been scheduling the interviews for year 2. And all of that, she's also trying to take all of that data, keeping all of the documents organized for the office. So trying to set up some of those operational things for the office, which has been really helpful. Thank you. Anything else you want to say on what you've been working on? I'm like, what else have you been working on? So many things.
Yes, I guess the other things I've been working on is kind of digging into some resources on best practices so that as we have questions or as we get into further in the law where we have to look at revocation procedures or renewal procedures, or there are so many other things that we haven't gotten to yet that we will need to develop. So digging into some of that research and drafting some memos for McCall and stuff like that.
And I will also
you-
mention, Madam Chair, that she has done an excellent job of putting together a sample list of questions that you may all want to ask when we get to the interview time. Think of all of the different types of charters that we have, and all of the different types of questions you could ask them. She's really put them into a nice document to prepare for those interviews.
Thank you. And Jenny, I wanted to ask you what you told the members when you made arrangements for them to come on December 11th, and how much time they ended up with for a presentation. Could you just speak to that, please?
Sure. So we extended it from 20 minutes to 30 minutes this year because we had fewer applications and 20 minutes felt really fast last year. Yes. So McCall, you'll have to tell me the exact details, but I believe it was 10 to 15 minutes for a presentation.
So we did 10 minutes for their initial presentation, which, typically is just the overall goal, mission, vision of their charter, what they're hoping to accomplish, what types of students they're planning to serve. And then we'll have 5 minutes or 15 minutes for Q&A. So that's the time that you then would be able to ask them questions, really dig into their applications. And then finally, the last 5 minutes is for public comment on each of the applications. That's another requirement that we're required to take public comment on each application. So 10, 15, 5.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I had a chance to meet with Jenny on Monday, which seems like a year ago now, about the quarterly financial reports that had come in so I just wanted to prompt you do you want to share with the board what you're preparing for January?
Sure. So my first task was to compile things came in several different looking formats. So compiling a master spreadsheet of all of the data. And then Board Member Quinlan and I really discussed what might be of interest to you. So in addition to the financial numbers, districts have to report on a narrative of their startup costs and ongoing program costs. So I've compiled a summary of those narratives because I think that's going to be the most interesting. And then we can dig into the numbers, sort of what percentage of expenses are going into instructional costs versus materials, those sort of thing.
Thank you.
Would you also have any comments on the sufficiency of these goals?
Great question. So I had a lot of districts that sent the goals in to me early, which gave me a great opportunity to work with them. The main thing I focused on and making sure that the goals were what we were looking for was that they were measurable. So making sure that districts had a clear way to provide evidence when they submit evidence for these goals in the accreditation system. So I felt like districts worked really hard. Most districts came in with goals that were already very clearly measurable and very aligned to their missions. But there were a few that we went back and forth a little bit and came up with a little bit of a more clearly measurable thing to set them up for success during that accreditation process.
Thank you. Any further comments on where we are, where we're going, we hope? All right. Yes.
I'm only somewhat joking with this, but one of the questions that we're asking is why they didn't use the application that we provided. Because it's not like I file my taxes and say, I don't want to use that form.
McCall
I
and
just
I
submit.
we have talked about that, and we're going to provide a Word document option next year instead of just a PDF. And hopefully that will solve some of that problem.
Because I did start looking at them, and it really is hard.
Yeah.
To go back and forth when it's not laid out in the application where you look exactly where it's supposed to be. And I've got to search a document. So thank you.
Yes. Anything else? Anyone has? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Madam Chair, I just have one more thing to give you guys an update on, and Jenny's going to hand something out well. I update you all on page 289 of your packet. You'll be able to see the public charter school performance framework evaluation criteria. This should not look new to you. We have presented this to you in the past, although we've had an opportunity to go back and review it with folks from the Office of Public Instruction based off of some of the new language and layouts for the accreditation process. Again, like we've said, we've really tried hard to align this document with our already existing accreditation process. We hear here all the time that we're trying not to duplicate efforts, and we're trying to make things ease of access, easier to update information or upload information. So you'll see in the document for the public charter school performance framework, its real goal is to set forth that academic and operational performance indicators. We worked really hard on this document with a group of folks actually from our public charter schools who joined us in coordination with folks from Office of Public Instruction to really think through what this document needed to look like. And for us, it's different than looking at accreditation, right? We're going to get accreditation on each of these public charter schools like we would for any of our other schools. But there was this additional requirement in statute that said you also have to basically assess them based off of their performance. And so we have this document. Again, these areas were almost all included in legislation as well. So we didn't make these up. We did add a few different areas where we thought it would be good to gather data from our public charter schools. Think things like transitions, what kind of supports are our charter schools providing for transitions from kindergarten to first grade, or elementary to middle, or middle to high. What's that really help in moving them forward? We also wanted to think through some other items. Let me find one here. I think attendance was a different one. Or no, I'm sorry. In accordance with attendance, also student engagement. Are students engaging in their learning? We talked a lot about that in the last couple days. So those are some of the new ones. I also wanted to note that given that the accreditation process is regular with minor deviations, advice and deficiency, we really had to think through our indicators and how they aligned with that already existing accreditation process. So the regular for the accreditation process is our MEET standard. If folks who are grading these think that the charter school just knocked it out of the park, they should then be designated that exceed standard, but they still would get regular on the regular accreditation process. Again, some of these areas don't overlap, so there'll be some separate review of these as well. But I wanted to note that for you because that is a little different than what we initially thought might be the way that we wanted to move forward. And also in conversations with folks at Office of Public Instruction, they actually thought it was really important that we kept that exceed standard sort of designation, because there will be opportunities where, we can use them as best practices to show others, what an exemplar is in certain areas. And we wanted to provide them that opportunity and show that meeting standard, is the baseline, and that we really encourage school districts to go above and beyond. So I wanted you to have the most recent performance framework at your fingertips. It's also on our webpage. And it'll be integrated, like you heard, into the accreditation process. So really want to thank folks at OPI for doing that. I can't imagine grading these on my own. So it will be of huge help to have them assist us in this, and really excited to get some of this data back. And Madam Chair, turn it back to you to see if there are any questions.
Okay. Are there any questions from Madam?
McCall, I have one more process question. I recall that you gave us an Excel spreadsheet of sort for us to, like, once we read through all our applications and scored them using the list, but then what we actually submitted to you was a spreadsheet.
Yes, thank you, Board Member Quinlan, for reminding me of that. I actually was just going back through the documents that and get something off to you. I think it actually is a lot easier for us to just get that spreadsheet from you than all 11 pages of the criteria. So I think we'll probably continue with that process. It was easy for us to compile then into one document.
Thank you. Anything else? Back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Wraps up item 14. Our next items are licensure, and we are just a little bit ahead of schedule. So we will take a 15-minute break and we'll be in recess until 3:15 promptly.
Kim, do you have someone to make the motions for licensure? Oh, gosh. So do I have to make a decision? The approve or deny the? I presume that's approve, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's good. But I want to make sure.
Two-minute warning.
Okay.
All really straightforward.
You're gonna lead the
Yeah.
licensure process.
I didn't get the message on this.
Call the meeting back to order. We are now on item number 15. Information on the annual professional development unit providers list. I am going to be covering for licensure committee chair Susie Hedlund for the balance of today. So Maria is online, and board members, we are into the 300s. We are now on page 304 of your 1057 page packet. Marie.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marie Judish. That's Judisch for the record, and I am the Senior Manager of Teaching and Learning. Today, I'm going to give you an overview of the 2023-2024 annual report for the Professional Development Unit Provider System. To best help you navigate this, I'm going to give some clarity around some of the terms and new acronyms you may not know within this report. The first one you'll see is PDUPS, is how we say that personally. And that is the Professional Development Unit Provider System. So this is the system in which all of our PDUs, or professional development units, are submitted by the different providers around the state. You'll see a little bit more here talking about where our PDU system, PDUP system, lives within the agency, and it ties directly to the Teach Montana system for licensure. Parts of this report also demonstrates that this data isn't quite giving us automated reporting systems yet, so it is very much manually manipulated. We've made some improvements on our data analysis from last year's report. Moving down, you'll see reference to the Administrative Rule 1056-216, which is where the approved professional development activities are described, and noting the compliance with the different rules as well in Chapter 55 and 57, making sure that those that are taking PDUs or earning PDUs are meeting the qualification for those. The data analysis was for July 1 of 2023 through June 30th of 2024. It should be noted that we do keep a list updated every 2 weeks on the OPI website that is hyperlinked within the document as well. So if we have new applicants into the system, you'll find those as soon as they're updated. Moving down, you'll see we do have two different systems that we're working with. We're working with the PDUP system, but also the Montana Teacher Learning Hub, which is one of our greatest PDU providers for the state. So the data doesn't come in one-on-one. So the team did a wonderful job putting it together, so in a way that makes sense. And I'll dive into that more, and please ask any clarifying questions when those pieces come in. It's worth noting on the middle of page 4, you'll see that there are a total of 844 registered providers. However, only 376 of those providers actually had an event within the last reporting year. And so the team has done a great job trying to clean those up recently to really make that a narrow and tight list so we know who is providing and making sure that it's cleaned up for future data use. I'm going to point out the key data points on the bottom of page 4 and help define a few more things. So PDU stands for the hours that are provided or conducted in a professional learning scenario. For example, if I do a 1-hour hub course or 1 PDU course on the hub, that's worth 1 PDU. However, certificates could be more than 1 hour. So that's where you're going to see some of those differences in those hours. It could be a year-long session worth 40 PDUs, but 1 certificate. So the numbers are close in alignment with the events and activities. However, the units could be very different based on the different offerings. So there were a total of 60,296 PDUs or hours issued across 15,905 events. The top providers for these were the Teacher Learning Hub, school districts themselves, professional education organizations such as MFPE, SAM, and our local curriculum consortia. 91% of those were online, heavily relying on the Teacher Learning Hub for that. 57,035 certificates issued. And of those 12,186 events attended, I want to note that that is for completion of courses. So we do have about 8,000 active enrollees right now on the Teacher Learning Hub that have earned 12,000 or completed 12,186 events. And that is 77% of all PD that is registered within the PDUP system. Going down to page 5, you'll see how we're putting together and demonstrating the different types of PDUs or PDU events. So for example, the first one on the top of page 5, you'll see that 49% of our PDUs are provided by school districts themselves. Again, this could be someone in-house that's a coach that's providing professional development. It could be bringing in vendors or different instructional experts around the state. You had some on earlier that I know have provided PDUs for our educators in the state. Our next greatest one there, you'll see professional education associations did another 27% of those. Government agencies, OPI, DPHHS, other entities, Board of Public Ed, allotted for 15%. Our universities and colleges, 7%. County superintendents, 1%. And tribal organizations, another 1%. Continuing down, I did demonstrate earlier that the 12,186 activities on the Teacher Learning Hub, that was course completion for the courses we do have on there. We do have approximately 200 courses currently on there, with about 38 that are in development to be added to the next coming year, which is probably a 500% increase in the last couple of years. So we're excited to bring more offerings to our educators in Montana. If you continue down, you'll see the differences like I tried to describe on the events versus the actual PDUs, because sometimes the numbers were very close, but they were not one-to-one. All right, I'm moving down to page 6 and just giving a few overview pieces that you'll see here. Again, the Teacher Learning Hub, a vital resource we're happy to have, issued 56% of all PDUs for the educators in the state. One thing I wanted to pause on here really quick is, now these are directly tied to licensure, but there are special circumstances that our team deals with regularly. Whether it's people coming from out of state or they have their own personal professional plans. For example, I had a teacher call who's doing a 200-hour yoga course. And I was like, wait a second, what are you teaching? Like, are you a high school math teacher? And she was a high school health teacher. So it's like, oh, okay, that makes sense, is why that would be aligned with something you would need for your professional development. And our standards instruction and professional learning team reviews all of those special circumstances and really tries to make sure that everyone that applies for those gets any credit that they deserve in earning PDUs toward their license renewal. Continuing down, and I can stop here soon and just give you a little bit more overview. I'm on page 7, and I'm just going through the online professional development offerings. Once again, of course, our Teacher Learning Hub, but we do see a lot of other entities that are providing online learning, including our professional education organizations, government agencies, etc. And then you get into the list, the many, many, many list of all the different types and the different providers. On page 8, you'll see how we are breaking down the frequency of the selected professional development categories. So this was breaking down into the different categories, whether it be assessment, ELA, English language arts, apologies, mental health and behavior. And I think it's really interesting to note that our highest numbers on there by far is the mental health and behavior, which with 2,413 PDUs in that category. Our next highest down there, our numbers are so close. Sorry, we were in the 1,757 for general school issues and administration. And then our EFA course comes in third there, which is required for a licensure. And one of our obviously most readily taken on the Teacher Learning Hub. I'm not going to go through all the lists, but I will say that the tables down below breaks down the different county superintendents, government agencies, et cetera, that were providing PDUs, the number of activities they provided, the number of PDUs tied to those activities, certificates, and then whether or not they were an online offering. And that acquires for 22-ish of your 1,000 some page document. With that, I will stand for any questions that you may have on the Professional Development Unit Provider Annual Report.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? Yes.
Thank you, Marie. I have a question about the certificates. What kind of data do you collect about the nature of the certificates?
Chair Tharp, Board Member Rasmussen, could you give me a little bit more context, please, so I can better answer?
Well, first of all, it's Board Member Quinlan.
Oh, I'm so sorry. You're so tiny on the screen.
That's fine. I guess I'm curious about whether these who's created these certificates, and how do they become official? I guess is what I'm looking at. So when you get a report of someone doing professional development to achieve a certificate, what do you learn? What do you know about what those certificates represent?
Chair Tharp, Board Member Quinlan. Right now, they must be registered within our system to be verified professional development unit providers. The system right now is pretty open in terms of who can apply and what they can apply for. We do reevaluate if they could be like sticky situations, and we usually elevate those to leadership if needed. But right now, they must be registered event providers in order to give out certificates that are created by the agency.
And just a follow-up question, and then, so they're a registered provider, and then what do you know about what was involved in terms of the earning the certificate?
Yes, Chair Tharp, Board Member Quinlan, right now they register the event itself and describe what type of event it is based on the different categories that were listed within the report. We do not currently collect objectives and things like that, but right now we are currently undergoing a big analysis on where we can provide improvements to the system to ensure we have strong PDUs and evaluations of those PDUs and events that are provided across the state. So we're digging in really deep on and analyzing what we could do better there.
Thank you, Marie.
Board Member Quinlan, I might be able to help you there. I'm a professional development unit provider. And so when I log into the PDUP system, well, I have two different ones. I either as a county superintendent, depending if I'm putting it on for my school specifically, wearing my county soup hat, or if you see on page 322, you can see where I'm at. I've got my certified instructor for youth mental health first aid and QPR. And so when I go into that system, I will specifically indicate, I'm teaching QPR to this staff, and I enter the date, the location. And then after the training, I go back and record how many certificates I issued for that. And so, and then it's required, I suppose at some point, Marie or somebody at the OPI could audit and double check that I'm actually doing that. Or I imagine if they wanted to, they could request the syllabus or whatever course material that I'm using to teach that. But these are both, for me particularly, these are both nationally recognized courses with the nationally recognized curriculum. And so that's what I'm doing that. When I log in as county superintendent, I enter in what I'm specifically covering. Usually during the first two days of school, the PIR days, I'll talk about orientation, I'll talk about acceptable use procedures and things like copyright law, compliance with FERPA and those sort of things. And so I'll list those specific topics when I log in, that's what I am requesting for a particular course offering there.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Marie or anything from the board?
Sure.
Yes.
Marie, I really appreciate page 312 where you have it broken down by the frequency of the selected category. And you know, when I look at that, I mean, part of it's heartwarming as far as knowing that they're intentionally trying to get mental health behavior on there and Indian education for all. But the fact that the mental health and behavior one is basically twice that of anything else really speaks to me about what more can we do as far as providing more of that, whether it's and not just online, but also just trying to help districts figure out how to do in-services about that and so forth. But I do appreciate it very much having it broken down like that, because it really is a snapshot. And I have to say, I'm encouraged that our educators are, like, to me, that's them actually calling out, reaching out, wanting help, wanting assistance, right? Wanting to know more. And so I want to compliment our teachers on that, but I also wonder what we can do to support on that end also, so.
Our board member Slinger, thank you for noting that. We've taken that into account in what we're looking at as course requests come in, and partnering with our the Student Support Services Department and what they're providing to the state as well. So thank you for that.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Marie, you mentioned you're adding about 39 right now to the hub. I'm wondering if you could speak to those.
Yes, I can pull up that list for myself here too. Chair Tharp and Board Member Hanman, we've taken requests not only internally as an agency, but also externally. We have requests from the Montana Historical Society. We have requests for support for English language learners, which I know we discussed earlier when speaking about early literacy, and then we've been working greatly to better support that from the standards point of view as well. Katie Madsen, our HiSET director, earlier mentioned that she is working on a hub course as well. So we also have a list out there, like what courses do you want to see? We have a survey that we're asking people to fill out to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the field and the professional development units that they require for their own professional learning, especially for, those remote educators that don't have access to quick learning, and making sure that we're utilizing our Title II funds to best support the field as they support our kids.
Thank you. Follow up. Are there questions on America 250 and the birthday and mental health among those? Seems to me those are priorities that we might want to address in the next couple of years.
Chair Tharp, Board Member Hanman, thank you for that. I will dig into that and see what those specific requests are, and I can share a list with you for our current course requests.
Any other board members? All right. Thank you, Marie. Appreciate your time.
Thank you all. Have a great day.
All right, moving on to item number 16, action on superintendent's recommendation on educator licensure annual and filing fee amounts. Board members, we are on page 334 of your board packet, and is April online? There you are. Good afternoon, April.
Good afternoon, Chair, board members. My name is April Grady. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for the Office of Public Instruction. And for the record, my last name is spelled Grady. So I have a presentation for you today. This came up at the last September, interim budget committee meeting, where we were reviewing some items regarding teacher licenses. And it was brought up that there was a balance in our teacher licenses state special revenue fund. So we wanted to take a look at the numbers and what the license fees were, and see if there was anything we could do with the amount of money we're projecting to collect since the new fee had started in January of 2024, based on our projected revenues. So this document on page 335 brings into consideration our ongoing annual costs that we have for the Teach Montana system, and then also the number of licenses issued, and then going on to the next page at 336, what we have collected for actual revenues for the license fees from July 1 of 2023 to December 31 of 2023, where it was the old rate, and then starting in January 1 of 2024, where it was the new rate. So with those projections, we've been able to work with our vendor for the Teach Montana system, and we negotiated the cost of continued licenses and maintenance down to $135,250. It was initially $180,000, and the 2 years of licensing and maintenance that we have paid to the vendor, currently at $180,000, was paid out of ESSER funds, which allowed us to have a starting balance in the state special revenue fund to ensure that we had enough money to cover our costs while initially collecting the new fee structure. So we are looking at a proposal of removing the $25 technology fee from the teacher fee structure. So currently, any teacher that's entering or going into the Teach Montana system to apply for a license is paying a $25 technology fee. And that fee is assessed whether they're going in to get an internship fee or any other of these fees, the fees on page, 337 from the initial fee structure that started on January 1st of 2024. So if they go in as a first-time Montana license application, pay $95, they pay the $95 plus the $25. Or if they are a subsequent license, they would also pay that $25 fee. So every time they go into the system, that fee is assessed. So back on page 335, we've determined that the total cost annually for maintaining the teacher's licensing system and paying for FTE to administer that system, and then also some internal support cost is $429,329 a year. We have determined that if we keep the fees exactly the way they are going into the future, we will collect $550,000 a year. If we remove the $25 technology fee from all of the transactions, we will collect $436,000 a year. So with the higher rate, obviously, we're looking at collecting $120,000 more revenue than it costs for the program. We've also determined that with the cost savings for this program from being able to use some ESSER funds to initiate the new software, we'll have about $160,000 in that state special revenue account at the end of fiscal year 25. If we reduce the technology fee, we'll be running this program with just less than $7,000 above what it costs to maintain the teacher licenses program. So our proposal is to remove that $25 technology fee for the board to take into consideration. And I will stand for any questions you may have.
Thank you, April. Less than 7,000 cuts are kind of tight. Is there a concern about that?
Not really, because I think with the, sorry, Chair, board members, I think that with that excess $160,000, if we get the authority to spend that money, we can offset some of the expenses moving forward. But this does give us then like a year or so that we think we can manage this account with the lower fee, and then we can reassess it at the end of that year time and see if it's the correct choice or not as far as the revenues versus expenses. But as long as we've negotiated the subscription and maintenance fee out for the next 3 years, so we know that that cost is going to stay in that $135,000 range with slight increases each year. So we know that we can maintain this at least the next year, hopefully into the future.
Okay, thank you. Other board member questions? Board Member Quinlan, do you have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the superintendent's recommendation to delete the $25 technology fee on the educator licensure annual and filing fees amounts for 2025.
I second it.
Motion by Board Member Quinlan, seconded by Board Member Schmidt. Any board discussion? Any public comment? You heard the motion, basically leaving teacher license fees the same with the exception of dropping the $25 technology fee. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. All right. Thank you, April. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, moving on. We're to item number 17. Notice of surrender. BPE case 2024-11, and we have Mr. Wooten from the OPI.
Sorry, I'm technologically challenged here on this microphone. Mr. Chair, board members, I'm Rick Wooten, one of the staff attorneys at the OPI. First, and very briefly, a notice of surrender. We had an issue where a teacher at a Montana public school was investigated and found to have been involved in inappropriate discussions with teenage students, after which the teacher was reprimanded and chose to resign their position at the school. When faced with the prospect of a public hearing in front of this board, the teacher chose to voluntarily resign their license, which the superintendent accepted. And unless there are any questions, I don't have much more to add to that.
Okay, board members, since it was already handled, this is just an information item unless you have any questions of Mr. Wooten. All right, we will move on to item number 18, action on initial review BP case 2024-09 Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, board members. Yes, this is initial review where we'll be asking the board to decide whether to push this on to a contested case hearing. That will be OPI's recommendation. It involves teacher Douglas Evans, SEID 194616. This is one of those kind of rare instances where the case is about a teacher who broke his contract. And under the substantial and material non-performance rule, the school district has initially filed a complaint with the board and then asked OPI to pick up the ball and run with the pursuing of it. I believe the board actually got the complaint before OPI did. And there's documentary and purported testimonial evidence to support that the contract was broken in less than 30 days before the school year started. And it was not for good cause and not with the permission of the board members. The maximum penalty for a first offender under this is a letter of reprimand, and that's what the OPI is seeking. I understand that, I'm sure you've seen a copy of it. Mr. Evans responds contesting the whole thing, so it's definitely ripe for a hearing. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Guess I'll turn to our legal counsel. Aislinn, do you have anything to add?
I don't, but I'm happy to answer any questions. I guess the only thing I would say is that if you're going to proceed with any sort of action, you do need to proceed to a contested case hearing.
Hey, board members, do you have any questions of either Mr. Wooten or of our own legal counsel? Board Member Quinlan, do you have a motion?
I do. I move to approve moving BPE case 2024-09 Evans to a contested case hearing at the January 2025 Board of Public Ed meeting.
Motion is to move this case 2024-09 Evans to a contested case hearing to be heard by this board in January. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Dr. Slinger. Board member discussion. At this time, if you have any additional questions of Aislinn, feel free to talk to her. Any other board members? No other board member comment. Is there any public comment? Seeing none, the motion is to approve moving case 2024-09 Evans to a contested case hearing in January. All members approving signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. All right, moving on to item number 19. I believe Executive Director Flynn, you have some information here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do believe that Mr. Maharis plans on being here for this item. So unless I hear otherwise, I think we should pause and give a little bit of time, given that this item was not scheduled for another, I don't know, hour on our agenda. So I'd like to just give a little time and see if he's going to be here, if that's okay, Mr. Chair.
All right, we will stand in recess. We'll take an initial recess of 10 minutes while we determine if Mr. Maharis plans on being here or not. We'll stand in recess until 3:55. Call this meeting back to order. We are proceeding with item number 19, action on initial review of BPE case 2024-10 Maheras, and our attorney Iceland Brown, do you have some information?
Yes, I do. I just got off the phone with Mr. Maheras, and he said he will not be present here today, but he and his attorney wish that this will proceed to a contested case hearing.
All right, thank you. We'll hand things over to OPI attorney Brenton Cranks.
Chair Tharp, members of the board, my name is Brenton Craigs. For the record, last name spelled C-R-A-G-G-S. I'm here on behalf of the Office of Public Instruction. We are requesting to move this case forward, BP case 2024-10, case Maheras, to a contested case hearing. Mr. Maheras is a superintendent for the Helena Flats School District. On August 31st, 2023, while acting in his capacity, Mr. Maheras engaged in corporal punishment of a middle school student. The Helena Flats School District investigated the incident, substantiated the report, and issued a disciplinary letter to Mr. Maheras on November 16th of 2023. Maheras was charged with 2 misdemeanor assault charges on November 20th, 2023 as a result of this incident and pled not guilty. On July 25th, 2024, Mr. Maheras pled no contest to reduced charge of 1 count of corporal punishment. OPI investigated, found credible evidence exists of Mr. Maheras' inappropriate conduct, constituting immoral conduct and resulting in the plea of no contest in violation of 20-4-110. OPI requests BP move this case to a full hearing, and we request that at which time the Board of Public Education issue Mr. Maheras a letter of reprimand and require a letter from his counselor indicating that he is safe to be around students within the next 6 months.
All right, thank you. Okay, we've heard from OPI, we've heard from our attorney, the wishes of Mr. Maheras. Do we have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve moving BPE case 2024-10 Maheras to a contested case hearing at the January Board of Public Ed meeting.
Motion is to move BPE case 2024-10 Maheras to a contested case hearing to take place in January. Is there a second?
I second.
Second by Board Member Hammond. Any board member discussion? Turn to our legal counsel. Iceland, do you have anything else to add?
I do not.
No more board member discussion. Is there any public comment? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. All right, thank you. And that concludes our work for today. We will reconvene right here back in the Wilson School Building, the Bozeman School District Number 7 Administrative Building at 8:30 tomorrow morning on Friday, November 22nd. And until then, the Board of Public Ed will stand in recess.
Which is 2 months until President-elect Trump returns to the